Good morning. I call to order the November 27, 2019 business meeting, and thank you all for coming. And I'd ask the County Administrator, Gary Schmidt, to please take the roll.
Yes, Chair Bernard. First staff support today, Stephen Madcor, County Council, Kevin Moss, Clerk to the Board. Roll call, Commissioner Humberston.
Here.
Commissioner Fisher.
Here.
Commissioner Schrader.
Here.
Commissioner Savas.
Here.
Chair Bernard.
Here. Please join me in a pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Well, first up is a presentation.
Yes, Commissioners. First is a presentation proclaiming Giving Tuesday in Clackamas County. Our presenter is Caroline Hill from County Administration.
Good morning, Commissioners, Administrator Schmidt, Kevin. So yes, we're here to talk about Giving Tuesday. This is a movement that started back in 2012 by the 92nd Street Y and the United Nations Foundation. The goal is to create an International Day of Charitable Giving. We like to emphasize volunteerism and philanthropy. This movement was brought to us by a person from Volunteers in Medicine. And would you mind coming up to the podium and say a few words about the movement, please? Her name is, I wrote it down here. Excuse me.
Darlene Fritchie.
Thank you.
I want to thank you for your consideration in doing this, and I would like to say this. I'm going to talk about the elephant in the room. I fell. I was lucky enough that the consideration never had to be given about, what do? I don't have money for a doctor to go to the emergency. It was never anything we thought of. We just did what we needed to do. However, so many of the people in our county don't have that consideration. They have to make a choice between getting treatment or putting a roof over their head or feeding their children. And while we at the clinic have free medical care, we have doctors and nurses that volunteer, we still have to keep the lights on. We still have to pay the water. And so we desperately need support so we can continue to provide for these families in our county.
Thank you.
Thank you. And because Clackamas County works with very many organizations within the county to provide all kinds of services, whether it's assistance with food, rent assistance, anything, we decided to go ahead and invite them so that we could recognize them today. If you don't mind, please standing at where you are and. Please remain standing. There's going to be a picture. Thank you very much. At this time, I would like to read the proclamation.
Okay.
Yes? Okay. Proclaiming Giving Tuesday in Clackamas County. Whereas Giving Tuesday was established as a national day of giving on the Tuesday following Thanksgiving. And whereas Giving Tuesday is a celebration of philanthropy and volunteerism where people give whatever they are able to give. And whereas Giving Tuesday is a day where citizens work together to share commitments, rally for favorite causes, build a stronger community, and think about other people. And whereas it is fitting and proper on Giving Tuesday and on every day to recognize the tremendous impact of philanthropy, volunteerism, and community service in Clackamas County, Oregon. And whereas Giving Tuesday is an opportunity to encourage citizens to serve others throughout this holiday season and during other times of the year. Now, therefore, the Clackamas County Board of Commissioners do hereby proclaim December 3rd, 2019 as Giving Tuesday in Clackamas County. We encourage all citizens to join together to give back to the community in any way that is personally meaningful.
Okay, entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move to approve the, I lost the term.
Proclamation.
Thank you. Proclamation. Second.
Tuesday.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the proclamation declaring, I guess, Tuesday in Clackamas, which
December
Tuesday is
3rd.
this, by the way?
Tuesday, December 3rd, next
Tuesday,
Tuesday.
December 3rd, as Giving Tuesday in Clackamas County. Any further discussion?
I just want to thank everyone here. I tell people often, 9 years of being a commissioner, the big discovering how many people and how many organizations are in the county that give and help our community, than those in need. In inclement weather, during the toughest times, people donate their own time. And I've just been overwhelmed by that, the compassion of our community and how rich we are as a community that give back to all. So I almost tear up every time I think about it. But it demonstrated here today. Look how many organizations or people here are being represented today. And this is just a small portion of the people that are out there giving. So I just want to give my gratitude and thanks and appreciation for everything you all do. So thank you.
Yeah, and in addition, if you did calculate all the hours of volunteerism, Clackamas County would have to have a lot higher taxes to cover the costs of all you do. And so thank you very much. We do have a grant program, which I imagine some of you have been recipients of. That was created, I'm going to say, about 10 years ago. And it's about $250,000. We already did that this year, but watch for that next year. If we can help, we're more than willing to help. Ken?
Yeah, I'd like to point out that there's probably 50 or more citizen volunteer groups that work with the various departments here in Clackamas County that you were referring to that stretch the resources that we have a lot further than they would go without that help. And I see one of them is a personal friend of mine sitting in the back of the room, and I know he's going to blush because I'm going to point him out. But he works for our radio, ham radio group that does helps our search and rescue here in Clackamas County and anywhere else they have to go. And it's Dave sitting in the back. Dave, would you stand up, please? He's my neighbor, and he's a former Marine, so I got to point him out.
Thank you very much. Oh, did we vote? We got to vote?
Not vote yet, no.
Okay, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much.
Okay, I would like to add that I have a sign-up sheet out there. If you haven't added your name to it, please do so, and your email address. I would like to send out a copy of the proclamation once it's signed to all of you. And thank you for coming.
Thank you. Well, there's a couple of items on the list next, and I'd like to have Nate come up because I have a feeling that one of them is going to be a lot of conversation. But first, Christine Lewis, your representative at Metro, is here, and they have a presentation that I hope is of interest to all of you.
So which is first?
Christine.
Okay.
Keep it under 2 hours, please. Thank you for taking the time to come to Clackamas County, and
I don't have to come far, Mr.
no, you
Chair.
don't.
Thank you for taking the time to hear me out. And, the last presentation we had on this subject was back in September. I wasn't here, for better or for worse. You had Chair Peterson and my colleague, Councilor Craddock, who does represent the eastern bit of Clackamas County, but I'm delighted to be here with you today. Again, for the record, my name's Christine Lewis. I represent District 2 at Metro Council, many of the communities of Clackamas County within Metro. I'm here today with a less than 2-hour presentation on our work towards a transportation funding measure. So when we think about what Metro's able to provide in terms of a regional investment strategy, we know it's time to invest in our community. And it's time to invest in our community region-wide. And we're linking it all together, from affordable homes in our communities to protecting parks and natural areas to safe, reliable, affordable transportation. These are the things that make our communities livable. And I'd like to really thank you as Clackamas for helping be leaders in implementation of our housing bond. Clackamas's IGA was just finalized last week. Clackamas and Beaverton are the first 2 of our 7 jurisdictions, so y'all are real leaders, so thanks for that. And additionally, in our parks measure, we just had incredible results out of Clackamas County in addition to the region, but with 62% approval within Clackamas County on the parks bond earlier this month, so thank you. The structure of the measure that we are looking towards 2020 for transportation is pretty complex. We are looking at several components, including what we're calling Tier 1 corridor projects, Tier 2 corridor projects, region-wide programs, oversight and accountability mechanisms, and all of this within the context of advancing regional policy. Regional policies such as Climate Smart, the Regional Transportation Plan adopted last year, our 2040 plan, and our equity strategy. These are all different components. We've been informed putting this together by listening to community coming out of our 2018 RTP. We started to have conversations individually as counselors with community, but this summer had a broader online survey for the entire region asking the same questions. Thank you to Clackamas County for helping promote that survey. I saw it many times posted on social media and in newsletters. We've also had local investment teams, including one specifically geared towards evaluation of potential investments in Clackamas County, made up of 9 Clackamas County residents sharing their time and perspectives, taking transit, driving down the roads, using the corridors that are under evaluation. This fall, we hosted community forums, one in each county. Several of you attended ours, which was in Oregon City. And then we are also informed by our community partnerships, making sure that we're open to hearing from communities most often left out of our conversations at Metro. Some of the priorities we've heard from the community are that we need to make it safer, especially for people who are walking or on bikes, that we need to improve transit service, reliability, and affordability, that we should do everything we can to prevent displacement and advance racial equity through these investments, that individuals want us to protect clean air and address climate change, and that these investments must be linked together with affordable housing, parks, jobs, and services. This is a bubble chart that explains a little bit of the timing of the process. So we're phasing the work so that each of these phases has its own particular set of engagements and task force recommendation and prioritization. So you'll see that we're in the kind of fall to winter where we've had discussion of corridors and the outcomes and the region-wide programs. And now we're narrowing down through the corridor projects, just beginning the conversation about what revenue mechanisms are available to us. The hope here is that we'll be able to paint the picture of the transportation system we want to see. Then we'll be able to start putting different components together about what is possible through a measure next year. I mentioned the Transportation Funding Task Force. Thank you, Chair Bernard, for your service on that committee. But it's a 35-member group, so a very large table representing elected officials, business, community, and transportation experts from across the region. And the council gave initial direction to the task force, but the task force dove in deeper in order to determine what the priority outcomes are. We have heard loud and clear the need to improve safety, to prioritize investments in supporting communities of color, to make it easier to get around, to address climate change, support resiliency, support clean air and water and healthy ecosystems, and to drive economic growth. Additionally, we want to make sure that we're leveraging regional and local investments through this work. So those are the criteria that Chair Bernard and 34 other members of the task force are using when they look at all the projects and programs that come before them. Corridor investments move people. It's why it's so critical that these corridors are not just about projects, they're about how people move across the region, about how people move into the center city, about how people move to our regional centers, and how people move to our town centers.
I see that thing is kind of getting worse and worse. Is there a way to adjust that? Apparently there is. All right, thanks.
Sorry, it's a PDF and not a traditional PowerPoint, so maybe I'm doing the buttons wrong.
I don't think so.
But corridor investments move people to jobs and opportunity. We know that transportation is more than just getting people from point A to point B for many people served by this measure. It means the opportunity to build wealth and improve quality of life. And we can't forget that these corridors, in addition to moving people, also move goods. This inter-county commuting chart is particularly interesting from the Clackamas County perspective, since we know that over 60% of our residents leave the county to go to work. But, you know, we've got folks from all three counties in the metro area going every which direction, including the Yamhill, Marion, and Clark counties, to go to work on their daily commutes. It's not all in and out of downtown Portland. The staff have put together their recommendation for the Tier 1 corridors. The proposed corridor funding in the staff report is $3.1 billion of funding with $2.1 billion leverage for a total corridor investment of $5.2 billion. It connects 18 regional centers and includes additional investment in transit that would yield 975 hours of daily additional passenger, or daily passenger delay saved. The investment proportion that is covered in an equity-focused area is $2.3 billion. So this is the staff report that does include some Clackamas highlights, including the McLaughlin area, the Sunrise 212, and C2C 181st. Task force members are in the process of deciding what happens next. There are some proposed amendments to the recommendation, and the task force will be developing their own recommendation based off of the staff report. It's important to note that there is a major Sunrise change submitted to the council, which was discussed at the task force meeting on November 20th, and hopefully that will be considered for amendment for the task force's recommendation. So the staff report's static. We're not going to see that change for the staff report. What's important is to make sure that Sunrise in the new proposal gets in on that task force recommendation. In addition to our corridor investments, we're going to make sure that we have region-wide programs that benefit every nook and cranny of the community. That's programs like Safe Routes to School, bus electrification, safety hotspots, Better Bus, Main Street revitalization, future corridor planning, protecting and preserving multifamily housing, and student or youth fare affordability programs. These would be run as programs with an annual budget stretched out over potentially 20 years. And then finally, we've heard loud and clear the need to have stable communities. So we would set aside funding to work with community and community partners to create anti-displacement and equitable development strategies in funded corridors, very similar to the success we've had pre-engaging with the communities alongside the Southwest Corridor and potential investment of that light rail system. I heard that beep. I'm actually already at the next steps. So we will have the task force gather December 11th for their first discussion of potential revenue mechanisms. Then on December 18th, the task force comes here to Clackamas County. We're really lucky to be able to host, I think, one of the more important meetings, which is the Tier 1 project recommendation discussion meeting. So Clackamas Community College Harmony Campus will be the host, and again, for folks, that's December 18th, 5:30 p.m. And there is opportunity for a lottery for public comment if you'd like to, as I'm speaking more to the people behind me or on the TV right now, if you would like to attend. Chair Bernard will see you there. Then in January, as soon as we're back from winter holiday, Metro Council will have a work session where we're going to hear the results from the Tier 1 task force discussion. And then on January 9th, Council ourselves will be having a public hearing for input on the task force recommendation. So that's going to be PCC Southeast 82nd and Division campus, and I don't have a time yet. And then January 14th, we're going to give more direction after hearing from community on the Tier 1 projects. And then the remainder of January and February, we're going to be working deeper in the revenue mechanisms and start the discussion of the Tier 2 projects. There are 2 Tier 2 projects in Clackamas County, the Willamette River Crossing, formerly known as the Oglo Bridge, as well as Highway 43. So that's something I'm particularly watching as we begin Tier 2 discussions. And with that, our hashtag is GetMoving2020, and I think I'm only like a minute over.
That was very good, and thank you. And I got to tell you, that one chart about the total amount of money, I have never seen that.
Yeah.
I've been to 14 meetings, and I've never seen that before.
Well, the staff report only came out last month, but you're right in that this is kind of us piecing together what that staff report really means instead of corridor by corridor, what's the total investment we're potentially going to see.
I also want to thank, Metro really has stepped up to listen to Clackamas County. We had 2 opportunities that no one else had about the Sunrise project. So I really appreciate people listening and staff working with us has been tremendous. And I'm impressed. So first we have Ken and then Sonia. No, I think Paul and then Sonia, right? Ken.
Just one quick question. Your presentation indicated that there would be some leveraged funds. I think it was around $2 billion. I was curious as to what sources of leveraged funds that would be.
The majority of those leverage funds are funds that are being leveraged for Southwest Corridor, and so that's local investments already made. I don't know if we're counting the Hope for federal funds there, but I assume we are also counting the Hope for the state funds. Other community corridors, I believe the Burnside Bridge is one, does have additional local investment already in place.
So you're counting funds that have already been expended? Is that what you're saying? I'm not quite sure I'm understanding it correctly.
So the leverage funds would just be funds not gathered through this tax or through this revenue package.
So what would be the sources, is what I'm getting at? In other words, are they federal grants, state grants, some other taxing source? I'm just trying to figure out what the source is.
In terms of Southwest Corridor, there's like 7 sources already identified that I can follow up with you. Some of them coming from local communities where I believe it's their general fund transportation dollars that have gone into it, but I will be able to follow up with you more specifically about what those leverage funds are.
Thank you.
One example might be on the Sunrise. We have 10 million worth of land we own.
Right.
And so that could be part of the leverage too.
Okay.
Paul.
That's what I was getting at.
Yeah,
So.
projects that come with something already baked in. I don't know if the Sunrise the 10 million was already counted in the staff report.
I just think when the taxpayers are looking at numbers like that the definition of what leverage funds means would be helpful, because does it mean just another source of taxation, or does it mean, as Commissioner Bernard pointed out, land that we already own, which makes sense, of course, because it gives the taxpayer a better picture of what they're voting for.
Yes.
Or against, as the case may be.
Yep, thank you.
Okay.
Paul. Yeah, well, thank you, Christine, for being here today. I also appreciate, in your new role, you've been very receptive and approachable, and even we met for coffee yesterday morning even, so I appreciate that relationship. And if you can you possibly scroll back to your policy priorities, just so I can help point out something? And this is something that's been, and I shared this with you in the past, I didn't get a chance to do that yesterday morning, but it's a greater discussion, I think, that ideally the key governments in the region ought to have a discussion about affordability. And I understand what the work on anti-displacement is, or displacement strategies, and my concern is it's not adequate, and it's not hitting the key, one of the key, I think, factors that's attributing to the Portland metro area with the fastest increase in unaffordability in the nation, okay? I think that's a statistic that is driving a lot of people on the street, unfortunately. A lot of people are becoming homeless because they can't afford the rents. It's the #1 cause of recent homelessness in the last 4 or 5 years when we do our point-in-time counts. So we know that our region is, again, it's not a good number that we're leading the nation in the lack of really affordability. And affordable housing has a certain meaning, a technical term, and there's also housing affordability, which was I'm really talking about. And my observation analysis has revealed supporting information that suggests that housing policies, land use policies, and transportation policies can contribute actually to the affordability crisis, and can, if adjusted, it can actually help reduce that fast rise into unaffordability, which gets to really anti-displacement. So if anti-displacement or displacement strategies are a Band-Aid to the problem, then I want to really I'm trying to drive towards the source of the problem, and I think that a greater discussion of some really good minds, and I think we have some good minds in elected leadership in the region, ought to be sitting down at a table talking about this, because my concern is what's missing on there, on those bullet points, is affordability. Affordability not for people that are homeless today per se, but that is a factor as well, but more for just average family. Everyone's feeling the pinch, most everyone. Some people have good incomes and their families are in good shape, but there's a lot of average people that are struggling as their taxes increase, as the cost of housing and rents increase, everything across the board. And I think that we can help bring that down, reduce that fast rise. And I think our transportation policies, I attribute as really part of that, and as well as land use policies. So I'm hoping we can have a greater discussion really about that and have that displacement tied into affordability discussion. And I don't know if there's an opportunity to do that. I've been thinking about how to verse and come to a Metro Council meeting, just like you're here at our meeting, and talk to the council again prior to your coming on the council. I've approached the Metro Council a couple of years ago. But I don't see traction or the conversation going the way or the understanding going the way I think it ought to be going. And it's not a question to you today. I'm not here to put you on the spot. Again, I think you're doing a great job. I have a lot of respect for you. But I'm hoping that, we can have that kind of a dialogue and look deeper, a deeper strategy in how we can resolve this issue, so we can just align ourselves with the average rise of cost of living and so forth. But our quality of life is a lot of people are really hurting right now, and it's not getting any better.
And thank you. I appreciate those comments, Commissioner. I think the community stabilization project that we're going to attach to all of our priority corridors goes to address those concerns, and it's been very successful thus far in the kind of first layer of it, which is the Southwest Corridor. But what you're speaking to is much broader when you're not just within that kind of geographic bubble of, a half mile this way or half mile that way, but the ripple effects that are in all of our communities as places become more attractive to live. The folks who have been pushed and pushed continue to get pushed. And you're right, that's an absolutely regional conversation that needs to be had.
Yeah, and for whether it's people in the audience today or people that are watching this tape in the future, one thing that really struck me was a August 2017 issue, I believe, of Metroscape, which is a PSU publication, not a Metro publication. But they did basically an overlay, heat overlays and mapping of the area, and looked at rents in the region. And what really came to light as I read through that is that all those areas have the highest rents are areas where government has made significant investments. And, so it's hard it's more than anecdotal, and a lot of people have realized that there's a relationship to it. So it draws a lot of development and draws a lot of people making investments in areas and buying housing and getting in the housing industry. We are the hottest market in the nation right now for investment in the housing because of the rental market. And so, but that hurts just the average households, and that's what I'm concerned about. So, but thank you for your comments.
Thank you very much for coming today.
Thank you.
Sonia, have a comment?
No, she got her answer already.
Yeah. My question was also about the leveraging, where those were coming from. So thank you for.
All right, we have some other folks here to talk about a decision made by our land use hearings officer, I understand, Ellen Burns and Reverend Sarah Gross Samuelson. Thank you for coming tonight, and I appreciate that you might need a little more time because you might be representing a larger group.
Yes, thank you.
So give you a little more time.
Good morning. I'm Ellen Burns. I live in Gladstone, but I'm a member of King of Kings Lutheran Church, which is in unincorporated Clackamas County. So Chair Bernard and Commissioners Humbertson, Fisher, Savas, and Schrader, I'm here to talk about the declaration of the state of emergency and emergency measures to address the housing crisis in Clackamas County. The declaration was first made, as you know, in November of 2017, and the second reaffirmation was established in August of this year. Establishing the state of emergency allowed the county to order measures to address the crisis. One of these measures, offered by Clackamas County Zoning and Development, established a temporary permit for a use otherwise prohibited, which allows churches and other nonprofit organizations to allow car camping or safe overnight shelter on their parking lots. King of Kings Lutheran Church went through a discernment process with the congregation and followed the county's recommendations for neighbor engagement, adding our own postcard notification process. We agreed to accept applicants through the coordinated housing access, provide toileting and hand-washing facilities, and arrange for trash removal. The church, now aligned with Metropolitan Alliance for Common Good, the Providence Bob Program, and other congregations, worked closely with zoning and held a community meeting. The application was approved. Subsequently, individuals objecting to the program attempted to disrupt church services throughout the summer by picketing and sounding car horns during our worship services. Modifications were made to the application, limiting the program to 6 months, providing for background checks, disallowing cooking on the premises, and providing night security. The application approval was appealed. Testimony was given before Fred Wilson, Clackamas County Hearings Officer. Mr. Wilson approved the application. However, he also added other conditions of approval in addition to the conditions our church had already accepted. These conditions included, and I quote, installing a 6-foot-high sight-obscuring fence along the entire perimeter of the property, except for along Southeast Thiessen Road. Security patrols shall occur at least 3 times per night for the length of the operation, and, I quote, the church must install a video and audio security system dedicated to monitoring all areas of the SOS car camping area. The security system must store a minimum of 90-day rolling history. The security footage must be made available to any neighbors who request the footage. Our church council considers the building of a 6-foot sight-obscuring fence around the perimeter of the property for a 6-month trial county program, purchasing and installing a video and audio security system capable of storing a minimum 90-day rolling history, and hiring security to patrol approximately every 4 hours to be an excessive financial burden. According to the county's own zoning laws, the 6-foot fence at the corner of Thiessen and Lauren Roads may be a traffic hazard. The stipulation to allow any neighbors to view the security footage at any time is likely a violation of the human rights of the persons on the property. Our church council also expressed concerns about the safety of the potential participants because of the extreme actions of the people who opposed the project. We were the only faith institution to step into this process of piloting a safe overnight shelter program at its inception. And now, at this time, and because of the circumstances I've outlined, we're unable to pursue the permit and thus stand unable to help our houseless neighbors in this way. Meanwhile, the housing crisis continues. If a willing body who stepped forward to accompany the county in this pilot project finds itself unable to participate in finding a solution because of the stipulations set forth by the county's own hearing officer, then what is to come of other faith institutions who might want to step in to help find a solution?
Thank you.
Chair Bernard, Commissioners Fisher, Schrader, Savis, and Humbertson. I am also here today to talk about the housing crisis in Clackamas County. My name is Pastor Sarah Gross Samuelson. I am the co-pastor organizer of Storyline Community. I also serve the Metropolitan Alliance for Common Good and the Clackamas Housing Team as one of its co-chairs. We represent a coalition of institutions in the county, including King of Kings Lutheran and the Providence Better Outcomes Through Bridges program, and concern ourselves with the work of equitable access to housing solutions. We have accompanied King of Kings through their process of working to establish a safe overnight shelter program in Oak Grove. And we have borne witness to the hard work they have done in engaging conversation with their neighbors around the issue of houselessness. Storyline Community itself, my community, has taken up the work of neighbor engagement and is actively partnering with organizations and individuals in Clackamas County to help neighbors engage and understand the complex story of our housing crisis. This past month, Clackamas County Health, Housing, and Human Services staff have been working hard to enlist area churches in implementing emergency warming shelter programs. The CHA waitlist continues to hold more names than there are beds available in the county. There is no question, and we've heard from you already today, how urgent the need is for increased shelter and equitable housing access. Our local economy continues to lag well behind the rising cost of housing. This has adversely affected our most vulnerable neighbors and citizens, creating more risk of houselessness rather than reducing the overall houseless population. The group that has gathered here today represents a wide network of faith communities and service providers who stand ready to engage creative solutions to address the high need for transitional shelters in the county. However, many of our faith institution partners have expressed hesitation, pause, or even unwillingness to engage a process as lengthy and complicated as King of Kings' land use permitting process has been. We're here today to ask you, our county commissioners, to consider removing some of those barriers to create more accessible solutions to our crisis in an equitable and responsive way. If you are here in this room today as a friend or member of the MACG Housing Team or King of Kings Lutheran, would you please stand so our commissioners can take note of our network of support? We want to help. We want to leverage our resources and our land to help abate this crisis, but we also need your help and your resources. You have power as our county commissioners to create inroads for creative solutions. This crisis is way too complex and too urgent to be left to the arduous space of a land use permitting process. It makes it too hard for faith institutions and nonprofits to step in and help in the ways that we are able. And it does not allow us to move with the urgency that this crisis deserves. In the coming days, we have invited our network to express their opinions to you as county commissioners through your board email address, available publicly on the website so conveniently. And I hope that the breadth of these emails and the representation might give you a picture of what is possible when citizens of Clackamas County work together for the good of our neighbors in need, especially those who are most vulnerable. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll have some further discussion after the next person, Tom Riggs. Morning, Tom.
Chair, Commissioners, Administrator, and staff, thank you for the opportunity to address you this morning. I am concerned about the requirements that are imposed on the King of Kings Safe Overnight Shelter proposal. I believe the county was right to initially grant the approval for the pilot program, but the additional requirements imposed by the hearing officer seem excessive, expensive, and at least one may be unconstitutional. Adding a 6-foot-high fence along 850 feet of property line, I estimate costs about $14,000 for a 6-month program. To hide the fact that there might be cars in a parking lot. Tripling the nightly security patrols, if 3 times a night through a neighborhood is the county's patrol standard, the sheriff is really gonna have to step up his game. Drug testing for every potential participant. I could go off on a tangent about the success of Housing First or the failures of the Florida Welfare Drug Testing Program, but all that information is widely available. The main issue I want to highlight is the requirement for the church to install a video and audio security system with a 90-day rolling history, and that the security footage must be made available to any neighbors who request the footage. That last part really surprised me as a condition imposed by Clackamas County. My work truck was recently broken into, and to review the security footage, I had to request through the tech department, who had to run it by the legal department for me to be able to review it, and then I had to request again to be able to release it to local law enforcement when I filed the police report. By contrast, without a report of a trespass or property crime, any neighbor of King of Kings who wants to harass the participants, judge their lifestyle choices, or maybe who just likes to watch people sleeping in their cars could say, yeah, give me some footage, and the program would have to provide it. I have no objection to surveillance being available to law enforcement or even security patrols after the report of an issue or a violation, but blanket availability to any neighbor at any time seems legally and morally wrong to me. Since the SOS proposal is at a church, I'll borrow a verse from the Bible, Matthew 5:37, let your yes mean yes and your no mean no. Many of the additional restrictions seem like a cowardly way for the county to say yes, but actually mean no. The county could do a blanket authorization of the SOS program for any parking lot countywide, but instead chose to proceed with a pilot program. And I certainly understand the value of a good pilot program. During World War II, my grandfather test drove tanks on different types of terrain stateside to minimize the chance they'd break down when they were in the battlefield. If he were here, he could tell you, you don't test a tank's ability to cross a muddy stream by building a bridge for it. Unless the county is willing to tell all potential future SOS program sites that they need to build fences, hire their own security, install surveillance systems, and tell every potential participant they have to sign away their privacy rights, a pilot program with all the restrictions that have been placed on King of Kings is not going to tell you what you need to know. I urge you to lift the excessive restrictions and allow the program to proceed as originally proposed. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'm going to start with some comments. First thing, we need to check with our legal folks about what we can do about this. It seems to me, first off, we ought to throw out the pilot program as a failure. The pilot program obviously is taught us a lot of lessons, and one of those is it's extremely excessive to have to go through these challenging processes for 3 cars. I mean, I thought you had, what, is there 30 cars here? We're talking about 3 cars. I mean, people are probably parking on the street around the church 3 cars every night. It doesn't make any sense. The thing I can say that about the process is that when we did the veterans pods, we did it right by doing this. And we had people who objected. And it was a pilot. It was very expensive. But, I've always thought of churches as a sanctuary. Churches have a lot more rights than a lot of other other businesses or properties than they have. So it just seems odd. So what I'd like to first do, do you guys want to wait for Nate to tell us what our next process would be?
Sure, I can wait.
I can wait.
Okay, so Nate, what can we, the county commission, do about this?
Well, as far as the land use decision goes, and just for folks here, my name's Nate Boderman, Assistant County Counsel, and as is relevant here, I represent the county and its land use appeals, not necessarily proceedings. That's a hearings officer.
Nate, could you speak up, please?
Yeah, you bet. Hold on. Let me bring this up. Maybe that helps. Better?
Thank you. Yeah.
All right. And so where we're at procedurally in the process is that we have a decision from the hearings officer. And the hearings officer is a independent land use attorney that's hired by the county to really serve as a proxy to make a decision on the county's behalf. That's a process that's been in place with Clackamas County for decades, really as long as I know of, where state law allows for a county or a city to hire, again, an independent decision maker to make a decision on their behalf. Once that decision's rendered, that is the official decision of the county. And so as far as further appeals, the decision, or I'm sorry, the county does not have the option to further appeal to LUBA. That would have to be initiated by an interested party, whether that be an applicant or an opponent. But there is precedent out there for more or less counties not appealing their own decision. That would be awkward. It would be Clackamas County versus Clackamas County at that point, and that's not allowed. And so, as far as further procedure, we don't have an official route to LUBA, which would be the reviewing body in this case. I guess I bring up as a matter of procedure that there is a reconsideration process in the zoning and development ordinance. Just based on what I know about this probably wouldn't be eligible for that. The reconsideration process is traditionally limited to scrivener's errors, unintentional omissions, things like that, not disagreements over facts or application of law, which this strikes me as. And so as the commission, really you don't have an avenue of appeal. It would have to take the form of another application, another program, something along those lines.
That's why I suggested just throwing out this program and starting a new one. I mean, is that a possibility? I mean, this was a test case. And can we just throw out the test case and call it something else? I don't know.
The test case as far as the application or the decision?
Yes.
At this point, we have a final decision, and so no. No, that is the county's decision. Now, whether they choose to implement that or not, or whether they choose to reapply for a different type of program is up to them. But no, we can't, at this point, unilaterally withdraw the decision.
Paul, I think Martha was first.
So my understanding is that one of the processes could be a LUBA appeal.
Martha.
Is that correct? A LUBA appeal. Could you, for the record, describe what that might mean for these folks?
Sure. So typically, LUBA appeals are initiated by an interested party filing within 21 days that the decision is made, what's called a notice of intent to appeal, which is a very simple document basically saying that we participated in the process below and we disagree with the decision. Once that notice of intent to appeal is filed, we go into a whole process of preparing the record, but more or less within a month or two, the person that filed, or the party that filed the notice of intent to appeal would then be expected to articulate their arguments in a brief. The county then would respond. Again, I represent the county in defending the decision, so politically, whether we disagree with it or not, typically it's our default position to defend the decision of the hearings officer. And so then we would respond. There's oral argument. Typically, the process takes about 3 or 4 months to fully find its way to an order from the Land Use Board of Appeals. From there, further appeals can be made to Oregon Court of Appeals, but that's what it looks like in a nutshell.
So we're kind of boxed in as a commission based on the process, but a LUBA appeal is one of the options, but you, as our lawyer, would have to present the hearings officers. Because I have to say, looking at these restrictions, and having worked in land use since 1997, I've never seen restrictions like this. This has really been, to me, wow. Never have I seen that. And my impression is that it's largely fear-based from people. And I think that what was most disturbing to me is when you mentioned that people are driving by a worship service and interrupting a worship service. I don't know if there's any other way to reconvene, to assess why people are so fearful of this. It seems so charitable and good and wholesome. So, but again, I'm getting to the heart. My heart is speaking here now, but the head part says one of the structural pieces would be to go ahead with a LUBA appeal. So,
Can I just offer a point of clarification?
yeah.
So King of Kings at this time, because of that neighborhood interaction, feels it best to just leave the permit lie where it is and to not take action on it. They don't want to say no and pull it yet, but they're in a process of discernment. The network surrounding King of Kings wants to take action, but is hesitant because of watching this happen to King of Kings. So they're a wide network of potential that is a missed opportunity at this point in time. So I don't think that LUBA would be something that King of Kings
That
would
they
want
would
to,
do.
and also they're kind of past the deadline because I think it's like this Friday or something. But we do want to pursue creative solutions.
So I might make a suggestion, because it's disheartening for me. And I don't speak about my faith mostly, but I'm a Benedictine oblate with Mount Angel Abbey. And, so this is very meaningful to me in what I do and what I think what my colleagues do with this. I have a good friend who does appreciative inquiry of how she moves ahead with pulling communities together. I'd sure like to give you her name and number, and maybe what you do is start that discussion. Because when I've talked to her about this, she says it's, people get fearful because when other folks who are homeless are in survival mode, they are fearful of the behaviors that sometimes people are exhibiting, largely because they have to survive. They're in survival mode. And once they understand, once you give people a there, and you take away the notion that they're just struggling to survive, the behaviors disappear. But that seems to be a pretty significant issue across the board that we've noticed. So I would love to continue working with you folks on that.
Thank you.
So-
And that is the space that my community occupies because we don't own land or a building
Right.
at Storyline. So we have taken up, my co-leader is a trained mediator. And so starting neighborhood conversations around that has been our work
Okay.
alongside King of Kings. But we love to meet with your colleague as well.
I have seen it work magic. It's a different way. It's looking at the positives of it as
Yeah.
opposed to the negatives.
Yeah.
So what they do is take away the negative, it's behaviors that we're fearful of, to saying, but this is how we're helping our neighbors. This is going to improve our community. So it starts from a different space as it moves forward with pulling people together. So anyway. Well, thank you so much for what you do. I mean, I was going to talk about what I was grateful for at the end, but I'm grateful for you folks for sure. So.
Okay, Gary, and then Paul.
Yes, so as Nate mentioned, the recommendations were made by the hearings officer, not by county staff, so let me mention that. Just from a process perspective, I suggest we're still under citizen communication, so you are hearing input from the community, and thank you to the community for preparing and sharing your input. I suggest that we have a policy session to discuss all the options available to you for next steps. You don't have to decide that right this moment, and let staff meet with the community members as well to get further input from you as we prepare that policy session for you. I propose from a policy process perspective, that could be the next step that we take for you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, so Paul.
Yeah, well, thanks. Well, I just wanted to, we often find ourselves when people come here with issues and we're somewhat caught by surprise. We just learned of these factors in the decision and the details here just a couple days ago. So we haven't had a chance to do just what Gary has prescribed we do. But I also feel that when people approach us at the business meeting, and these tapes, these videos are replayed in the community around the county, people watch them. Sometimes you don't have the context. So I'm going to explain the context of this a little bit. So while Chair Bernard talked about the pilot project, that it's a failure, well, I don't think it's a failure really until we actually have a chance to go through the motions and actually see it through. And how this all came about, and for some of you already know this, I know many of the people from MACG and I see in the audience who have done some great work in our community, and we are extremely appreciative for what you do. I want to thank each and every one of you for helping the people that are in need. But we learned of this, two things from Lane County. Number one, their veteran shelter, their shelter for families. We learned of their car camping program, and our first pilot project was a veteran shelter. We opened that a year ago. We've placed 14 people in a permanent housing, a veteran so far. A lot of fear on the onset of that, and those fears were allayed when they realized there were no problems, because we actually had a program that we followed it to make sure it was well managed and well maintained and well thought through. And so that's proved a success, and so we're continuing to do that program. The car camping one we learned of as well from Lane County. And recently, I inquired about that. How's that going in Lane County? And actually talked to one of the commissioners in Lane County just last week. How is that going? And their car camping program has gone without any problems. It is working. As a matter of fact, there are dozens of churches and so forth that provide that car camping model without incident. And so the idea of the pilot was introduce it, prove to the community it can work, and then grow from that. And we haven't had a chance to actually do that here in the county, and I think that was why the board approved the pilot program, to prove to the so forth the second. So this was unforeseen by a lot of us to some degree. I always go back to my first time I did the point-in-time homeless count 6 or 7 years ago. And the first couple that I talked to, actually it was one individual, then his wife walked over, and then their child walked over. Recently homeless as a virtue of the cost of housing, forced them out on the street, and they're living in their car. So not all people that are homeless are, of the chronic or the stereotype homeless that we know. Granted, there are, but not all. So with that as the context, I just want to say that it's unfortunate that some of those fears are what they are, and it's true. People are car camping today illegally on the streets in my neighborhood, which is the Oak Grove neighborhood. They are doing it today. This is a means of doing it in a more organized way. Churches have been sanctuaries for centuries, and that's what they do. So it's just a natural fit to some degree, but we also need to make sure the community feels safe, and there are no problems. And I gave assurances to people I know that if anything goes wrong, whether it's the veteran shelter or something goes wrong, the law enforcement of the county will step in. We'll make the adjustments to make sure the community is safe. A lot to say, but I appreciate all your work, and we'll just have to figure out at the work session on how we navigate this, similar to what Commissioner Schrader did and talked about in the administrator and our legal staff. So we'll work with you and figure out a way to do this in a way that does not impact the community and gives them the assurances and inspires others to do the right thing as well. So understood. Thank you for your work.
Thank you.
Sonia.
Yeah, I really appreciate everyone here today. Thank you. And thank you, Tom, for emailing me and also showing up here today to share what you put so articulately in your email. First comment is we know that homelessness costs more than housing, and we know that what solves homelessness is housing first, which is without barriers, and supportive services that are wrapped around a person to meet them where they are, to help them on their journey. That all being said, and we are working regionally on an effort to garner the resources necessary to really combat this issue. But in the meantime, we have declared an emergency, and so for housing, and so when we do get together for that policy session, which I'm going to suggest we do very, very soon as possible, even if it's just a 30-minute list, what I would really like to know is what authority do we have underneath our housing emergency declaration, which could allow us to institute some emergency ordinance to deal with this that will allow us to, especially for nonprofits and faith community, we should not have these restrictions. Quite frankly, I'm embarrassed as a Clackamas County Commissioner that these types of restrictions came from one of our hearing officers, especially the video surveillance. I have a physical reaction in my body when I hear about that. So I appreciate everyone who's here. This conversation is not over. If we are going to act swiftly and quickly, we need to act thoughtfully, which means we have to act holistically and responsibly. So input from everyone appreciated, and look forward to the policy session. I think we have strategy after this meeting, so we'll get together with Gary and Stephen and plan the policy session. So thank you.
Thank you, Ken.
Well, I echo the comments of my colleagues, but I would, when we have our policy session, there's one concept that came up today that I'm interested in knowing what the legal what the legal framework is, if there is one, on the concept of sanctuary. It has been around for centuries as a concept with churches and governments, and I don't know if there is a legal foundation for it or not, but I would like to know.
None that I'm aware of in the land use context. If there's anything that would preempt our land use regulations in that regard, we can certainly look into it and get back to you.
I'd be interested to know if there's something that you might not currently know about.
Sure.
Thank you.
So this is site-specific, correct?
This particular application, that's my understanding, yes.
And it sounds like the church is probably not going to go the rest of the process. So we could actually start over and do an emergency ordinance that allows up to 3 cars overnight and some of these other things, and just disregard this unless that church specifically wants to continue the process, right?
We would need to see how that interacted with the remainder of the zoning ordinance, but yes, the whole purpose of this was to qualify it under the zoning ordinance. And so in theory, if you made changes to the zoning ordinance to remove whatever restriction was there, then yes, you could permit it. You know, I can't speak to what those changes would look like or, you know, staff's comments on those in the past, but yes, I mean, in theory, that would be the approach you could take to adjust the ordinance to address this.
I mean, what it says is, why would anyone attempt to do this if they got to go through this process again? And you know, the weather is getting cold. My guess is it's January or February before we're going to get this on the agenda. And frankly, I think that's a little late. You think you can do it sooner?
We can do it December 10th, because I want time for our staff to meet with the members of the community here.
Okay.
You can declare this as part of the housing emergency
Yes.
declaration.
Right.
You have the authority
That's
to do
what
that.
we need to do.
Okay, I'd like to do that today, but I probably don't have that option.
Let's have a policy session with you, please.
It has to be agendized.
My hands are tied. Paul?
So I have a question for Nate, and this is more of a bigger picture, whether it's the county or the cities or other counties that this decision might have some bearing. And so my question is, what is and I'm shocked at the fact that we just learned of this and also learned that the deadline for a LUBA appeal is Friday, if I understand correctly, right?
I believe that's correct, yes.
So what is the minimal effort to meet the deadline? What has to be done by Friday?
Yeah, so as I alluded to earlier, it's actually fairly simple. It's filing with LUBA what's called a notice of intent to appeal, which is really what's your name, who participated. I mean, something that LUBA has a form for, in fact. Most people don't find it to be very onerous, and I think a very, as far as filing fees go, reasonable filing fee of a couple $100 perhaps. But yeah, I mean, unless you get that notice of intent to appeal filed by the deadline, which I believe is Friday, then this decision becomes absolutely final and is subject to no further appeal.
And that's what I'm afraid of. I'm afraid of that, absent a challenge to that could have deeper meaning to more than just Clackamas County, the government, and it could have perhaps some, you know, it might be a reference. So I'm concerned about that.
Yeah, I mean, again, this is a site-specific application, and so there'd be, you know, little risk of precedential value. But, you know, as far as the process goes, you're absolutely correct in that it would preclude any further appeals to this particular application. It would become final.
At this site?
At this site for this specific application. It doesn't mean that there couldn't be another application filed on this site that would adjust the proposal in a certain way. But yes, for this particular decision, for this site, for this proposal, it would be final.
But there's nothing that's really unique about this site that would be that dissimilar to any other sites. You know, I don't see any there's no unique characteristic that wouldn't apply to another.
I mean, the surrounding neighborhood, I mean, you take all these on a case-by-case basis, and when you look at the criteria, they're highly discretionary criteria. I mean, one of which is evaluating the impacts to the surrounding neighborhood, and the surrounding neighborhood for this particular site is not going to be the same as the surrounding neighborhood for other sites.
Yeah.
Well, the distinction is there's an address.
Yeah.
It refers to a specific address.
I was just talking about the characteristics of the site.
Sonia, and then we need to move on.
Yeah. Thank you, Chair Bernard. I'm just thinking one of my first acts as commissioner was approving this pilot program, and that was a long time ago. That's over 2.5 years ago, and now here we are at this stage, and I'm just expecting that a LUBA appeal would take additional time. I don't know how long. You might want to, how long does that take?
Again, typically 3 to 4 months is what we tell
Yeah,
people
so
when you
then now
initiate.
we're into spring. So I look forward to December 10th, looking at all options and look at what we can do under our housing emergency to address this issue.
Question about the LUBA appeal, because actually it was approved.
Well, you're going to have to be on the mic.
I have a question about the LUBA appeal because actually it was approved. It was just approved with all those conditions.
And the
They
LUBA appeal,
appealed to the hearings
and the
officer.
LUBA appeal challenges that decision at the state level.
Well, if your question is whether you'd have standing, if you're in favor of an application, if you'd have standing to challenge an approval, but the conditions?
Yes.
Yes, you would. Yes, absolutely. In fact, we have one right now where the applicant that was approved is appealing the conditions and the opponents are appealing the conditions. So we're getting it from both sides.
December 10th.
You can make a decision in the next 2 weeks. We'll expedite this as quick as we can, but Tuesday, December 10th, we'll have a session with you that gives the staff time to prepare, to meet with the community leaders and have a recommendation for you at
Okay,
that time.
great.
Thank you, Administrator Schmidt.
Thanks. We'll work on it. We hear you. And write us letters or email us.
Yes, and like Here Together Facebook page, which is the larger effort to address chronic homelessness in our Tri-County community. Please stay informed on that. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you very much. All right, thank you, Nate. Appreciate it. The next is a public hearing. Gary?
Yes, Commissioners, this is a first reading of a code amendment relating to County Code Amendment, Chapter 9.02, Application and Enforcement of the Clackamas County Building Code, and Chapter 9.03, Excavation and Grading to Maintain Current Business Practices, Services, and Consistency. Our presenters are Cheryl Bell and Matt Rozelle from the Department of Transportation and Development.
Good morning. Thank you for coming.
Yeah, good morning, Chair, Commissioners, Administrator. I thought everybody was going to stay for some charts and graphs on the building code, but I guess not. So I know Dan's super excited, though. We're going to just jump ahead into our first reading. We've discussed this with you in two previous policy sessions, one on September 24th and one on November 5th. And just as a reminder, the genesis of the amendments before you in this first reading were changes made by the State Building Codes Division to the scope and administration provisions of the State Building Code that limited the building code to occupiable buildings. So we've gone back into county code to make changes so that we can continue business practices as they exist today. I think I'm going to jump ahead a little bit because I know we've talked about this in the previous policy sessions. We have done some public outreach. We've made sure that it's been publicized, put on our website, sent notices. To date, we have had no public comment. Today serves as an opportunity to do public comment, and so I don't know that we have any others in public comment in here. But in light of that and the fact that we've had previous discussions, we'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, do any commissioners have any clarifying questions? Nope. So I don't either. So with that, I'll open the public hearing and ask if anyone would like to testify on this matter. We'll call them by number. One. Let's see, we don't have any. We'll close the public hearing and I'll entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move we read the ordinance by title only.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we read the ordinance by title only. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, I'll ask the clerk to assign a number and read the ordinance by title only.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is the first reading of Ordinance 07-2019, County Code Amendment to Chapter 9.02, Application and Enforcement of Clackamas County Building Code, and Chapter 9.03, Excavation and Grading to Maintain Current Business Practices, Services, and Consistency.
Thank you. Any further discussion? So with that, I will announce that the second reading will be Tuesday, or Thursday, December 12th at 2019 at 10 a.m. And with that, we're done with that portion. Thank you very much. We'll move on to the consent agenda, and I'll ask the clerk to read the consent agenda by title.
Thank you again, Mr. Chair. On today's consent agenda, under Health, Housing, Human Services, we have approval of an intergovernmental agreement with Oregon City School District to provide kindergarten readiness partnership and innovation services, approval of intergovernmental agreement with Oregon Department of Transportation Rail and Public Transit Division for HB 2017 State Transportation Improvement Funding Discretionary Program Funds for the Regional Integrated Fare Collection System Analysis Project, approval of an intergovernmental agreement with Clackamas County Development Agency for the NCRA Housing Rehabilitation and Homebuyer Assistance Programs. Under our Department of Transportation Development, approval of a resolution declaring the public necessity and purpose for acquisition of rights-of-way easements and fee property for Southeast 90th Avenue Reconstruction Project and authorizing good faith negotiation with condemnation actions. Under elected officials, approval of previous business meeting minutes, a request by the Clackamas County Sheriff's Office to enter into an intergovernmental agreement with Clackamas Community College for the 2019-2020 GED classes at the county jail. Request from the Clackamas County Sheriff's Office to enter into an intergovernmental agreement with Clackamas Community College Teaching Assistant Services for jail GED classes, and a request by the Clackamas County Sheriff's Office to enter into an intergovernmental agreement with Clackamas Community College for the 2019-2020 parenting classes for inmates at the county jail, approval of a contract amendment with NAF Care for MAT coordinator at the Clackamas County Jail. Under our Juvenile Department, approval of an intergovernmental agreement with Water Environment Services for youth work crews for the Project Payback Program, approval of an intergovernmental agreement with the City of Happy Valley for Community Diversion Program Services. Under our Technology Services Department, approval of a service level agreement with Hoodland Fire District number 74 for a lease of dark fiber. Under our Water Environment Services, approval of a project funding agreement between Water Environment Services and the Energy Trust of Oregon related to West Tri-Cities Resources Recovery Facility Funding Agreement, approval of renewal number 2 to an intergovernmental agreement between Clackamas County Juvenile Department and Water Environment Services, approval of amendment number 2 to the IGA between Portland State University and Water Environment Services, approval of contract with Cascade Environmental Group LLC for the Carly Creek Site Maintenance and Mitigation Monitoring, and that concludes today's consent agenda.
Thank you very much. Do any commissioners want to remove or pull an item from the consent agenda? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion.
I move approval.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we approve the consent agenda. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Thank you. Looks like it's been, all right. With that, County Administrator updates.
Yes, Commissioners, happy to share with you some good news happening here at Clackamas County. First, more than 350 community members recently attended an open house on November 16th to discuss the new community center, park, and libraries coming to Oak Lodge and Gladstone. Participants were overwhelmingly positive and excited about these projects, and they shared their ideas about how to bring these services to life. They also toured the Old Concord School building and enjoyed fun times for the whole family. The open house was made possible by our Business and Community Services Department and the joint efforts of our Library District Division and North Clackamas Parks and Recreation District in cooperation with the City of Gladstone. So thank you to our staff for their work on that effort. Second, the Housing Authority of Clackamas County successfully competed for and has received 50 new vouchers to serve individuals who are non-elderly and disabled for their housing needs. This award is from the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, and our Housing Authority's quick utilization of this award has resulted in our eligibility to apply for these vouchers and future vouchers. So thank you to our staff in our Housing Department and Health, Housing, and Human Services for their always outstanding work serving our community. And I would like to wish you, Commissioners, and our staff and the public a happy Thanksgiving. I'm grateful for the opportunity to live in this county and to work at this county and to support all of you. Happy Thanksgiving.
And the community event you mentioned had free pie.
Yes.
It was probably one of the best community events I've been to in a long time. A lot of excitement, large crowd.
That's
It was
very
just
nice.
great. obviously, there's a lot of excitement in the air about the Concord School property. Martha?
Well, I'm going to try and speak into the microphone, Ken, okay? 'Cause I tend to be a little more soft-spoken, I guess. I just want to let folks know how grateful I am. Before Thanksgiving, I'm grateful for my children. I'm grateful for my grandchildren. I'm grateful for my dogs. I'm grateful that I'm very lucky enough to have a warm house. And I'm grateful to do this work where I hope that we can make sure other folks have warm, safe, decent places to live. I think this is a time of year particularly that we need to be thinking of this. It is getting colder outside, and we want to make sure that people have the shelter they need to get through this season. And for me, I think that one of the main focuses of our work has always been the welfare of our citizens across the board, whether it be in water, whether it be in transportation, whether it be in our service delivery systems, helping out with mental health. I have been so grateful to be part of this work for so many years, and it certainly is a gift, personal gift to me, because I would say, and I think my colleagues would say this too, it gives us a personal focus and really a meaning in life that I think is critical, at least for me, to feel as if we're making a difference individually and as a group. So with that, I could tell you what I did all week, but I don't think I'm going to do that because I think we need to move ahead. So the word of the week is gratitude. Okay, the quality of being grateful or thankful. Cultivate the habit of being grateful for every good thing that comes to you and give thanks continuously. And because all things have contributed to your advancement, you should include all things in your gratitude. So for this Thanksgiving, that's what my wish is for all of you, to rest in gratitude for what we have and what we do. Arts and culture in the county. New Century Players presents the Octet Bridge Club, Friday, November 29th, and Saturday, November 30th, 7:30 p.m., Sunday, December 1st, 2 p.m., Roseville Performing Arts Center in Milwaukee. On alternate Friday evenings, 8 sisters meet to play bridge and gossip. The first act takes place in 1934. The second 10 years later during a Halloween bridge party where each act out her costumes persona. The youngest has just gotten out of a sanitarium and knows that she must cut the bonds to her family and strike out on her own. A charming comedy about American life in a bygone era. And Milwaukee First Friday Poetry Reading and Open Mic, November 29th and Saturday, November 30th, 11 a.m. to 7 p.m. On Saturday, and Sunday, December 1st, 11 a.m. to 5 p.m. at the Rain Spark Gallery, Lake Oswego. Over 30 artists exhibiting their art. Come check out the various pieces and shop for meaningful holiday gifts. And for more information, clackamasartsalliance.org, and Shakespeare in Love is still ongoing through December 8th at the Lakewood Theater. It has gotten absolutely fantastic reviews. It has a group of very young folk, by young I mean late 20s, early 30s, playing those parts. They were at my house for a cast party. It was one of the most fun cast parties I've ever hosted. And I would really suggest, if you have the time or want to get some early Christmas gifts, to get some tickets to see Shakespeare in Love. Thank you.
Thank you. And we have Ken.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And gratitude was exactly the right word for today.
Yeah.
And let's not look at Thanksgiving as the day before Black Friday, where we go out and get more stuff when we already have plenty. So let's be grateful for what we do have. Over the last week or two, some of the following things that we've been participating in went to rhododendron and government camp CPO meetings. We all attended the Clayton Moore grand opening for 24 units of housing for low-income veterans and their families. Attended the Wood Innovation Grant projects that were presented by the OSU Students of Architecture from our Wood Innovations, $100,000 Wood Innovations Grant program to look at different models for our courthouse. attended the Climate Action Coalition meeting with staff and citizens from the community. Also attended the Bridging Cultures Thanksgiving dinner in Canby, where you get an interesting combination of Mexican food and traditional American Thanksgiving meal, which is definitely an interesting combination. Last night attended with some of the commissioners the Grand Ronde presentation on the Blue Heron project and how they're planning to go forward and some of the grants they'll be applying for to do the mitigation work that has to be done there. And once again reiterate that how grateful I am for the family, the friends, the colleagues, and this work that we have the privilege of doing. And on that note, I didn't forget this time, the dog. This is Danny. He is a 5-year-old Siberian Husky. Danny's days of cruising the land as part of the T-Birds has drawn to a close, and he's looking to settle down from his wilder days into a forever home. And here's what he's looking for in this next chapter of his life. He's looking for someone who loves his breed and is knowledgeable about his breed, someone who is patient, walks every day, a fenced yard to play in, is looking to have many adventures in the great Northwest that you could go on together and provide him with the best years yet. Danny is playful with his dog and people friends, but he also likes to have time to chill out during the day. If you think Danny would be a good fit for your lifestyle, come on in and ask to meet him today. For more information about Danny or other adoptable dogs, please contact Dog Services at 503-655-8628 or www.clackamas.us/dogs. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. And Paul.
Yeah, well, it seemed to be a quite interesting day here this morning. I mean, obviously, we had the folks here from Giving Tuesday and a lot of our folks that help feed people and our philanthropic groups and a number of people that are donating their time and energy and resources to people in need. So, but the rest of the meeting with regards to the folks from the King of Kings and efforts and even our, to some degree, our presentation from Christine Lewis from Metro, you know, the topic of our, I think really an affordability crisis, creating a lot of problems, you know, people on the street, homeless, people in need of shelter, people in need of, you know, obviously quality housing at some stage as we transition to that. But my concern is, and I kind of touched on it with Councilor Lewis, is that a lot of us are doing great work on treating or dealing with some of the folks that are in need, and we're dealing with the symptoms, but we're not dealing or looking at the complete cause. There are other communities and regions in the country that are not suffering like this, like we are. And I think we have to ask ourselves why. Why are we different, and why is this happening? And I think really if we can get down to that core issue, which I think is being missed, you know, it's affordability, it's about affordability, it's about displacement, it's about all those things that are adding to the problem. We have got to look at that. It's totally responsible for us to help people in need and deal with the symptoms. But I really think that absent someone taking an effort to look at the core problems and find ways of making those adjustments, I don't think that's responsible for us, all of us. And I'm not saying the 5 of us here today, certainly us included, but all people in government in the region and in the state ought to be talking about this problem. And I hope that when we talk about the summit that we get perhaps earlier in the year, that we actually talk about this. I'm not sure we will, but I'm hoping that we can, and get some expertise wrapped around this issue to make sure that we don't drive people out of the very place they grew up, out of the very place that they spent their entire life and went to school. They can't. It's kind of a sad day when you can't afford to live in the very own neighborhood that you grew up in. That's a sad day, and when it affects this many people, you know, we have a response. I believe we, especially the commission, that because we're cognizant of this problem, ought to be more attuned and focus on this issue. So with that, I want to say I am grateful and thankful for all the great work that our employees here at Clackamas County do, and also our people that are volunteering in the county, our nonprofits and all our volunteers. I'm just so grateful for all the great work you do on behalf of the citizens of Clackamas County. Have a safe and happy holiday.
Thank you, Paul and Sonia.
Thank you, Chair Bernard. I wanted to share one of the highlights of last week, which was at the Association of Oregon Counties. We all attended the conference, which I learned a lot, and I'm sure I speak for all of us when I say that. I did have the privilege of moderating a panel on loneliness, senior loneliness. We had staff from both Clackamas and Washington counties, which shared some very compelling information. So I just wanted to highlight a few of the things that were shared. Most strikingly, for me personally, was this slide that says loneliness is more dangerous to your health than smoking 15 cigarettes a day. And part of the reason why loneliness is so challenging is the social isolation can lead to increased dementia, decline in physical and mental health. And because we have a population that continues to get older, which is all of us and those that are older than us, our population has many more people who are older, and as we all know, as people age, they lose some of their connections, people die, people become isolated, family gets very busy. And so one thing that we have done in Clackamas County, which is the Senior Loneliness Line, when we were at the National Association of Counties last summer, we received an award for that Senior Loneliness Line. So seniors can call and talk. In 2018, there were 160 volunteers that were on the phone in a partnership with the Lines for Life. There were over 1,900 calls, and there were over 462 hours with callers. So this little effort of people having a place to call is really important. So I have a few personal things I want to share in regards to this. And so Kevin, if you could do the first slide. It is Thanksgiving, and we have things that we're thankful for. For me, I'm thankful for family. And this issue of people being older, this is my Aunt Annette. We lost her less than a year ago. She was 95 years old in this picture. This was just shortly before she passed. But my Aunt Annette, she was one of the first airline stewardesses for TWA. She used to give us the stories about how she traveled the world with her hat box and how she used to have to do her face exercises to keep getting a double chin. But she was a very vibrant, she did her yoga. She started that at age 60. And she did yoga almost through the end of her life. But we noticed in the last year of her life, as her friends continued to pass on and she was left, and she couldn't drive anymore, and her hearing became more challenged, that her social isolation started. And we really tried to give her phone calls. And next to me in that picture is her daughter Larissa, and then my cousin Shirley, who just turned 81 years old 2 days ago. But we all really tried to reduce that social isolation and loneliness, but we saw it, and we saw it in the decline in her health. And that's something that we need to be thinking of when it comes to our loved ones. And then I have my next picture, which is, this is Tootsie, and Tootsie is Kirk, my husband's grandmother. She was 100 years old in this picture. She lived an incredible life, independent until she was 95. She struggled with hearing loss, but right before her 100th birthday, they fixed her hearing aids so that she could hear on her 100th birthday. This Thanksgiving is particularly challenging because I'm thinking a lot about Tootsie. She spent every Thanksgiving with us. We used to play a game which we would put nickels in the pot, and whoever won got to take all the nickels. She would get so upset, and I can't actually say this because this is televised of some of the words that would come out of her mouth, when she lost her pot of nickels to her son Gordon, who is in the second picture standing up in the back because he would cheat and it would become quite the family event. But I just think about Tootsie because when she could finally have her hearing back at age 100, her connection to others became very much more engaged. But 2 weeks before she passed, she had a dream that she was reunited with her husband who'd passed 50 years before her. And when she woke up, she was just really mad. And she said, you can imagine what it was. She says, I'm just ready to go. I'm ready to go. And 2 weeks later, in her bed with hospice around her, she passed at 100 years and a half. So, this Thanksgiving, I just want to encourage these people that touch our lives that are inside of us. They shape us. They nurture us. They make us who we are. They give us our love, our passion, our purpose. And for those that are here that we embrace around that Thanksgiving table, and for those that have passed on, let's just share the word of the week is gratitude.
Thank you. One of the things mentioned about people living in their cars, on Veterans Day in Oregon City, VFW, we met a gentleman who was a vet who was living in his car just recently. I mean, these are the kinds of people who end up living in their cars, and those are people who their benefits or their Social Security no longer can pay the rent. So I had an opportunity while you guys were all talking and looking up ORS 401.309, which is a emergency ordinance that counties and cities have the ability to do. It's you have to specifically identify a length of time, specific conditions, designate an emergency agency. I could think housing might be one, and only when necessary for public safety. I think that's easily identified. I also want to mention that Metro, the IGA on the housing bond, I'm proud of Clackamas County's hard work, being one of the first to complete that IGA process, and I believe last week we adopted that IGA, if I remember right. Communication one of the really important things about what this commission does, and I think you saw some of that today, is that communication is key. Communication is how you build relationships and how you learn things. I'm really proud of the resolution of the West issue with the City of Oregon City and other cities, which we resolved last week. Gladstone Library, Oak Grove and Jennings Lodge, a 2-building, 1 library solution, a great process. Proud that we've put that behind us. And I want to thank the employees and volunteers and organizations in the county for all they do. We couldn't do it without you. And I'm thankful for all of you. This is a great job, a great opportunity, have an impact on our community. And how we get there may be different, but we all want to do great things for the community. So with that, we have an executive session after this and then strategy. And with that, we are adjourned. Thank you very much.